Virtue is a morally good, positive trait or quality that has become a habit or disposition. For example, if I am in the habit of telling the truth even when it is difficult or embarrassing, if truth-telling has become second nature for me, if I become predisposed to tell the truth, then honesty is one of my virtues. Honesty has become an element of my character. I am an honest person. Needless to say, becoming a person of virtue, forming a good character, is a lifelong process.
The Catechism of the Catholic Church lists 4 major human virtues: prudence, justice, temperance, and courage, and 3 theological virtues: faith, hope, and charity. Most other virtues are in some way related to these. For example, the virtue of honesty is related to justice. The word we use for the opposite of a virtue is a vice. The traditional list of vices includes pride or arrogance, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth or apathy.
Drawing upon and enlarging this tradition, St. John Baptist de La Salle listed 12 virtues that he urged his teachers to cultivate. In the 18th century, Brother Agathon, the 5th Superior General of the Brothers of the Christian Schools, reissued the list in a much longer letter titled The 12 Virtues of a Good Teacher. Let's take a look at those 12 virtues of a Lasallian educator.
The first virtue on the list is gravitas, a word which implies seriousness and dignity. A person with the virtue of gravitas takes herself and her work seriously and has the self-confidence that allows her to be sensitive to others and so to take the other's issues and needs with the appropriate level of seriousness. The teacher who has the virtue of gravity, then, doesn't speak or act in ways that are dismal and gloomy on the one hand, nor silly and juvenile on the other. Because a teacher with this virtue takes her responsibilities seriously, students are able to take their teacher and the example she sets seriously. Gravitas, appropriately serious and dignified.
Several high school seniors were asked to write about the virtues of teachers they admired. Maria wrote, "Gravitas regulates the exterior of the teacher. It involves modesty, politeness, and good order. The teacher refuses to lose their temper and will use a moderate tone of voice. It's as if this description was written to describe my science teacher. He never lets us get too silly and would always transition us nicely back into our lesson. If someone were to stop into our classroom, they would be able to tell how much learning was happening."
The second virtue is silence. A person who lacks gravitas may be uncomfortable with silence. He may feel restless, lack self-confidence, and so compensate by becoming overly talkative, always filling silence with chatter. A person with the virtue of silence, however, can be calm and serene, and so is able to create a classroom environment that is calm and peaceful. Such a teacher knows when to speak and when to remain silent, and because he respects his students, he is not only a good communicator, but also a good listener. Silence. Serenity and calm rooted in self-confidence and gravitas.
Speaking of one of his teachers, a senior by the name of Christopher wrote, "Silence is a very powerful thing, especially when coming from a teacher. Silence can be used to make a point, whether it is to allow students to learn with each other or to gain control of a classroom without yelling. My math teacher was a man of silence. While teaching, he spoke only when he needed to. He typically spoke solely when answering a question or teaching a new topic to the class. Then we were allowed to do the problems and seek each other for help. Our teacher walked around the class to make sure everyone was learning, and if a student didn't understand something, he would step in. He understood that too much speaking leads to non-cooperation and loss of interest."
The third virtue on de La Salle's list is humility. Many people seem to think that being humble means allowing others to use them like a doormat. They assume being humble means having no self-esteem, no self-love. But that's not accurate. In fact, the opposite of humility is not self-esteem, self-love, and pride in oneself. The opposite of humility is arrogance, conceit, narcissism, hubris. In other words, a bloated and unrealistic sense of one's own value and importance. True humility is nothing more and nothing less than a realistic appraisal of one's own importance, rank, and position. Jesus never told us to hate ourselves and love others. No, he told us to love others the way we love ourselves. That's humility. So a teacher who has developed the virtue of humility is able to put the best interests of students ahead of her own interests when necessary, not out of any sense of self-hate, but out of agape, the same kind of love that God has for us. Such a teacher doesn't need to be the center of attention or to demonstrate her superiority over her students. The humble teacher accepts her own limitations and those of others without disdain, disrespect, or scorn. The humble teacher is able to laugh at herself, and because she is conscious of her own limitations, she can understand and adapt to students' foibles, difficulties, and issues. Humility, a realistic self-appraisal.
Reflecting on humility, Basher wrote about one of his teachers. Humility is all about knowing who you are, admitting your faults, and not having to brag about your achievements. Basically, humility prevents pride from getting in the way. My math teacher never told us she went to Harvard. We only learned that later. In fact, anytime she made a minor error on a math calculation, she would not take offense when a student corrected her. She never put her status as a teacher before us. In all things, she was modest and humble.
Fourth and fifth are two closely related virtues, prudence and wisdom. To paraphrase the Catechism of the Catholic Church, prudence and wisdom are the virtues that empower us to A. Figure out what is true, right, and good, and B. Discover the best means, the best way to achieve what is true, right, and good. These virtues require an understanding of and an insight into people, things, events, and situations, and the ability to control one's emotional reactions so that one's principles, values, reason, and knowledge determine one's actions. In other words, the prudent and wise teacher has the ability to discipline and govern himself and avoid speaking or acting out of uncontrolled emotion. Because a prudent teacher avoids whatever might demean, humiliate, or bring shame on his own reputation, students can respect their teacher and see him as a role model. The wisdom of this teacher includes his desire to master his own discipline and to continue to learn and grow throughout his career, so he models lifelong learning for his students. And with the knowledge of his students a prudent teacher attains, he has the ability to plan lessons and to use strategies that will be effective. Prudence and wisdom, the ability to discover what is right and good and to find ways to attain them.
J.D. wrote about the prudence of two of her teachers. My study period teachers exhibited much prudence. If any of us made a mistake, they acknowledged it and showed us that we need to learn from all of our mistakes. They see what us kids go through and they connect it to their past. They have practical common sense and street smarts. Both of them went out of the way to make study hall a place where kids feel safe and valued. Referring to her Spanish teacher's wisdom, Elise wrote, "She showed such wisdom. She is knowledgeable in her subject, having lived in Spain and experienced the culture. She is wise in that she knows how to teach with love and with faith, and how to pass that on to her students. Class always began with prayers written by her students. She knows her material, and she knows her students. I have seen her put so much effort into organizing anything from the Spanish exchange program to each day's lessons. She was and is an incredible role model."
The sixth virtue is an especially important one, patience. The patient teacher has perseverance. That is, she is able to endure under difficult circumstances and remain steadfast. The patient teacher is able to control herself when frustrated with students or colleagues and can avoid emotional outbursts, harsh and offensive language, and violent or otherwise excessive actions. Patience banishes unrealistic expectations and unnecessary worry and brings serenity and calm. The patient teacher knows that this too will pass and that Rome wasn't built in a day. It is a virtue worth cultivating. Patience, endurance, and perseverance.
Writing about the patience of one of her English teachers, Katie wrote, "She has the ability to calmly command a huge class of over 30 kids with respect. Any time a student said something out of line, she was able to take a deep breath and calmly ask for our attention again. I honor her ability to let the little things go. I admire her devotion to literature and her love of teaching."
The seventh virtue on de La Salle's list is reserve. Reserve is self-control, and it results in the ability to think, speak, and act with moderation, discretion, and modesty. As we have already seen, all of the virtues already mentioned, gravitas, silence, humility, prudence, and wisdom, require self-control. The teacher with the virtue of reserve is able to control himself in circumstances that might lead him to grow angry or upset. Reserve requires a teacher to act everywhere and at all times with consideration for the fact that students are often both innocent and very impressionable. Reserve, self-control leading to moderate and modest thought, speech, and action.
Georgie writes about a Spanish teacher with the virtue of reserve. She knew when to speak and when not to. I suppose as a teacher, you have to learn how to pick and choose which battles are worth fighting. She knew when a situation needed attention and when it was best to let things go.
The eighth virtue is gentleness. Gentleness of mind, heart, manner, and conduct. The teacher who possesses the virtue of gentleness of mind is able to make judgments without harshness, without emotion, without considering her own merit and supposed superiority. Gentleness of heart allows her to have goals and ambitions without being stubborn or pursuing them in a ruthless or immoral way. Gentleness of manner is the teacher's ability to behave according to good and right principles without wanting to impose them on others over whom she has no authority. Finally, gentleness of conduct compels the teacher to act with simplicity and uprightness, to be straightforward and without a hidden agenda, while not unreasonably contradicting others. Gentleness of mind, heart, manner, and conduct.
Luke wrote about a teacher whose gentleness he admires. The virtue of gentleness involves teaching with tenderness, calmness, and patience. My Spanish teacher was one of those teachers who wins students' affection through her love. One time, we were taking a quiz, and I was confused about one of the questions. Instead of ignoring my request and telling me she could not help me during a quiz, she sat with me and taught me the material individually. When I see her in the hallway, I'm always greeted with a, "Hi, Lukey."
The ninth virtue of the Lasallian teacher is zeal. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, zeal is a strong feeling of interest and enthusiasm that makes one very eager or determined to do something. Both de La Salle and Brother Agathon have religious zeal in mind, specifically the desire to give glory to God enthusiastically and lovingly. The zealous educator teaches the gospel by living a life in imitation of Jesus Christ, because he knows students learn more by seeing than by hearing. He is eager to teach young people those things that will enable them to know, love, and serve God. His zeal makes it more possible to be patient with his students and to avoid getting discouraged when difficulties arise. But zeal also includes courage, the ability to speak out and act with strength when necessary. Zeal, enthusiastic desire to give glory to God in word, deed, and by example.
Mariel writes, "There is never a day that my English teacher's class is not full of great energy. It is the class I look forward to every day, especially when I'm having a bad day. He is full of enthusiasm and is contagious. I don't know too many teachers who can take a class full of seniors on a Monday morning and make them want to learn, but he certainly can.
The 10th virtue is vigilance. When it comes to fulfilling all her duties and responsibilities, the vigilant teacher does so with diligence and keeps an eye out for possible dangers or difficulties. This teacher is watchful and observant. She is vigilant about her own life and about the lives and behavior of her students. Without becoming restless, suspicious, or fearful, this teacher has her eyes wide open, watching over herself and her little flock. Vigilance, diligence, and watchfulness over self and students.
Kim hasn't forgotten the vigilance of one of her teachers. My guidance counselor is a great teacher who shows the virtue of vigilance. When I had him as a teacher, he always knew what was going on. Even if I didn't think he saw what I was doing, he knew. Not only did he make sure we were paying attention, but he also made sure to be paying attention to us too. He always reminds me of the dress code. It is great to see a teacher who had me as a student freshman year, who is now a guidance counselor and still cares about me.
The 11th virtue of a Lasallian teacher is piety. Piety has to do with devotion and reverence. The pious person is one who devoutly fulfills his religious obligations, who gives to God what is due to God. The piety of a Lasallian teacher should be real and sincere, with no room for falsehood or hypocrisy. Such a teacher strives to be a model of all the Christian and moral virtues. Again, he is a Lasallian who lives his faith and teaches the gospel by modeling it. Piety, devotion to and reverence for God and religion.
Ryan writes about a coach whose piety made a great impression on him. My coach began class with the best prayers. He has helped me make sense of how important my family is to me. I spent a lot of time with him in class and during practice. He taught all of us on the team to look out for others in need. He helped me figure out the priorities in my life. He has definitely been an important person in my life.
Lasallian teacher virtue number 12, generosity. Generosity is the virtue of the teacher who voluntarily sacrifices her personal interests for those of another. It is her generosity that enables a teacher to give herself over and to devote herself to a lifelong career in teaching. Though teaching is her vocation, the virtue of generosity allows her to put her profession, one that makes demands and requires continual effort and application over many years, as her central concern. Without such generosity, the teaching ministry becomes just another job. Generosity, self-sacrifice for students in one's teaching ministry.
Jada Sola writes, my science teacher is the moderator of the Social Concerns Committee as well as a full-time science teacher. She has helped coordinate all aspects of our Adopt a Family program. She has given up free periods to coordinate all of this. In everything she does and says, she is always thinking about ways to help others and give of herself.
Obviously, St. LaSalle and Brother Agathon assumed Lasallian teachers would take the human and theological virtues seriously. All Christians, indeed all reasonable people of goodwill, should want to make prudence, justice, temperance, and courage part of their character. And all who believe in God desire the three theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity.
But LaSalle and Agathon urged all Lasallians, and indeed all teachers, to go further, to be prudent, yes, but also to develop these 11 additional virtues, these habits of the heart. 1. Gravitas, speaking and acting with appropriate seriousness and dignity. 2. Silence, serenity and calm rooted in self-confidence and gravitas. 3. Humility, a realistic self-appraisal that is neither self-loathing nor arrogant. 4 and 5, prudence and wisdom, the ability to discover what is right and good and to find ways to attain them. 6, patience, endurance and perseverance.
7. Reserve, self-control leading to moderate and modest thought, speech, and action. 8. Gentleness, of mind, heart, manner, and conduct. 9. Zeal, enthusiastic desire to give glory to God in word, deed, and by example. 10. Vigilance, diligence and watchfulness over self and students. 11. Piety, devotion to and reverence for God and religion. 12. Generosity, self-sacrifice for students and the teaching ministry.
For some of us, many of these virtues may come easily, but there are other virtues we may need to become more aware of and may need to consciously work at. The Catechism of the Catholic Church reminds us that moral virtues are both the seed and the fruit of morally good actions. In other words, virtues are acquired by effort. The person who makes an effort to consistently speak and act with patience will eventually make that virtue a part of herself, her character. Needless to say, the life of virtue is demanding and often not easy, and it is important to remember that character formation is a lifelong process.
In the words of St. Paul, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things.